next year's cars are already in the showroom. And we're not at next year yet. And the reason is because the future is big business. When you're driving your brand new car off the lot, you got to know that there's an architect and an engineer somewhere who's planning way ahead and has got some gizmos in that car that you're just going to want to have next year, because the future is big. And while you're even thinking about whatever car it is that you happen to be driving, there are engineers that are working, they're constantly working to develop the next car, and the next car, and the next car. This, by the way, is a Mercedes that you're going to be able to purchase in a couple of years. They work on it and develop it, and they try to figure out what you're going to really enjoy in the future, and so they devise their plan. All Madison Avenue wants is to get your buck. And they think in terms of the future. People spend billions, did I say billions with a B? Billions of dollars asking fortune tellers to talk to them about the future. The fortune teller doesn't know who you are, but you give her your credit card and she will tell you who you're going to marry and how many children you're going to have. And people spend money on it. And the reason is they want to know the future. They're just anxious to know what the future holds. They even have horoscopes, and the horoscopes are out there to give you daily advice as to what you should or shouldn't do during that day. And if you read some of that stuff, it's amazing. It's just like common sense. Like, for instance, don't argue with your wife today. It's a great day for flying, but a bad day for landing. They got all kinds of advice to give us because people are really concerned about the future. The Bible tells us everything we need to know about the future. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. It's a great verse. It's a comforting verse. There's only one problem with the verse. It leaves out the details. Because we like step by step, blow by blow. We want to know what the in-between is, and God doesn't give us the in-between. And I think there's a great reason why God doesn't give us all of the in-between stuff. Futuristic is a strength. Now, the term futuristic might seem strange to you, but what it simply means is people who have a vision of things to be, a vision of the future. They constantly think in terms of what tomorrow can bring and what could happen tomorrow and what must happen tomorrow and what should happen tomorrow. And I'm going to give you just a simple illustration to show you what the futuristic strength is like. Thomas Edison was about 60 years old. He was having dinner when he received word from one of his workers that the plant, his factory, caught on fire. So he left and went down to look at the fire, and when he got there, the flames were 6 and 7 stories high. 8 fire truck divisions came, couldn't put the flames out. So he told his son, go home and tell your mom to come because she's going to see the best fire she's ever going to see. While he's looking at this plant burning down to the ground, Thomas Edison was thinking about the plant he was going to build. That he was going to take the mess that this fire created and redo and remake and revive his dream. That is a futuristic mind. Futuristic mind is somebody that no matter what is happening in the present, their focus and their attention is on the future. And somehow they're going to let their dream, whatever their dream might be something that they will work at day by day to finally get there. What I want to do this morning is talk about Joseph in the Bible. Joseph was named after me. And, well, maybe it was, could be the other way around. I was named after Joseph. But Joseph was an interesting person who had the futuristic strength. He was 17 years old when you break into the story in the 37th chapter of Genesis, and he was his father's favorite son. Jacob had 12 sons, but he liked Joseph the most. He liked him so much that he gave him a coat of many colors. What do you think the impact of that would have on the other 11? They hated Joseph. What surprises me is they didn't hate their father for what he did, but they hated Joseph because he was the favorite son. But at the age of 17, God sent him a dream. Now, Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers. So he said to them, please hear this dream which I have dreamed. Behold, my sheaf arose, and your sheaves stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf. Now, if you were Joseph, and your brothers hated you, would you tell your brothers this dream? The scripture says that they really hated him now, and his brothers said to him, shall you indeed reign over us? So they hated him even more. Now that's bad enough, but then the scripture goes on to say, and then he dreamed still another dream, and told it to his brothers and said, look, I have dreamed another dream. The sun, the moon, 11 stars bow down to me. Do you think that telling his brothers that second dream is going to endear him to his brothers? The brothers hated him even more. Sometimes we just got to know what not to tell people. I mean, you can get so excited about something that you think the Lord is going to be doing in your life, but sharing it with somebody else may not be the best idea. Now, I'm not going to complain or I'm not going to criticize Joseph for what he did. I'm just saying for myself that had God given me the second dream, it would still be a secret. I would have never shared it with my brother. So Joseph, here's the problem. This is a problem. You may not see it when you start reading this text, but it is a problem. Joseph knew that his brothers were going to bow down to him. What he did not know was that he was going to bow down to Pharaoh for 13 years. So, Joseph is living with the dream, my brothers are going to bow down to me, but I'm bowing down to Potiphar and Potiphar's family. And for 13 years, all I'm doing is bowing down to people. I'm living with a contradiction. Have you ever? Has God ever shared something with you that specifically was a promise that God made to you, and you turn around and it seems as if the promise that God made to you is now contradicted by the circumstances that you find yourself facing? No wonder we have to walk by faith. Because if you're looking to your circumstances to give you clues about what's going on, you'll be misled. Our focus has to be on what God said to us, not what circumstances is trying to say to us. Joseph knew his brothers were going to bow down to him, but he did not know he was going to do a whole lot of bowing down. He did not know. God never told him that his brothers were going to throw him in a pit. Never told him there was a plot against him. Never told him that. That was a detail that God left out. It's interesting God leaves that out. God never told him anything about Potiphar's wife making eyes at him. God never told him that when Potiphar's wife got through, he'd be thrown into a dungeon. God left out the details. And if you're wondering why God has left out the details in your life, wonder no more. God purposely leaves the details out, because I think if he gave us all of the details, we'd have a nervous breakdown. I know God called me to preach. I know that because my mother told me to pray every night, to pray, and Lord made me a preacher and a missionary. That's what I prayed, that's what I believed, and God made me a preacher. He did not tell me that after graduating from Bible school as valedictorian, I would be taking on a job as a custodian for 2 years. Why did he leave that detail out? It was an important step for me. I learned a lot of things during those 2 years, 2.5 years, that I needed to learn, but God never shared that with me. He didn't tell me that I was going to be starting up a church. I don't want to start a church. Starting a church is the last thing in my mind. He called me to preach. And to me, preaching is not starting a church. And he didn't tell me that after you start the church, there was going to be a church split, and the entire choir was going to leave, leaving me to sing solo. So low you can't hear me. God leaves the details out of our lives on purpose. If God would have told me that I was coming to California to start a church, I would have stayed in Pennsylvania. I was already thinking about a 10-acre farm with a horse for Carol Ann in the barn. And I would still be a preacher, but I had this what do I know? Farmer Joe, I don't know anything about farming. But I know I wouldn't have been coming to California because I pastored 2 churches before I came to California, and all I did was pastor. I didn't start anything. I just kept things going. I knew how to grease the wheels and tighten up the belts and keep going. I had no idea. Neither did I have an idea of what it would be to start up a church. God leaves the details out. But he wants you to know this: all things work together for good to them that love God and are called according to his purpose. God's saying, I'm telling you what the finished product is. Keep your eyes on me. I will get you where I said I would get you. You may be broken and beaten and bloodied and limping, but you will get where I want you to be. All things mean all things. And that's what we have to rest in. I don't need to hire and pay a fortune teller to tell me what my future is. I already know what my future is. The book told me what the future is. And God is not a man that he would lie. Now, after having said all that, I need to say this for those, not only for those who have the futuristic strength, but for those who have a promise of God, for those who have God spoken to them so that God was going to open up a way for them. You need to know this: welcome to adversity. If you want to live life without adversity, it's a fantasy. It's a fairy tale. It's make-believe. It's a comic strip. All life represents adversity. You know the mountain that you're facing? Whatever that mountain is, that mountain that you're facing, behind that mountain is another mountain. And another mountain. And that's the picture of life. And sometimes it's the other mountain that shocks us. Wait a minute, God, you brought me through this. What am I doing facing another? Because life is just a series of adversities that make us stronger. It will either make us better or bitter. God wants it to make us better. During adversity, Joseph was going to learn something that he'd be able to look back at and recognize. We don't need to look back at it. We are looking back at Joseph's life, and so we can look forward to this. When he was going through his adversity, God was with him. And the Lord was with Joseph. When he went to Potiphar's house, the Lord was with Joseph. When he had to live like a servant, the Lord was with Joseph. When Potiphar's wife got him in a dungeon, even in the dungeon, the Lord was with Joseph. Doesn't that sound the same thing that Jesus told his disciples when he said, "Lo, I am with you always, even to the end"? And the reason is because he wants us to know what Joseph experienced, and that is the Lord will be with you in your adversity. We think that our adversity is proof that the Lord is not with us. But the reality is that adversity is proof that God is with you. And he will never leave you, and he will never forsake you. You know, when the scripture says, when Jesus says, "Lo, I'm with you always," it also follows up with, if God before you, who can be against you? But that does not mean that you won't go through a battle. You will go through battles. What it does mean is after the battle is over, you'll be standing. You might be a little shaky, but you'll be standing. Like the song says, I will survive. It's as if God was telling Paul to tell us, now we know that all things work together for good. It's as if he was telling, go tell the people, you will survive. You can get knocked down, but you will survive. It could rain on your parade, but you will survive. We got to keep our mind on the futuristic promise that God has given. You will survive. And this is an interesting observation, while Joseph was dealing with his misfortune, because I can't see what he went through as anything but misfortune. But while he was dealing with his misfortune, God was dealing with his good fortune. But he was taking the material of his misfortune and turning it into the material of his good fortune. While Joseph was holding ashes in his hand, God was taking those ashes and turning them into beauty. We don't see that part. We just have to accept that this is a walk of faith, and what God promised, He's going to see us through. So adversity is something that's part of your life, is part of my life. Yours may be different from mine. Mine's going to be different from yours, but we will all go through adversity. Second, adversity is the path, not the detour. Adversity is the path, not the dead end. It is the way that God gets us to the fulfillment of the promise. It's the path that God takes us. Joseph, I would have understood this. I would have felt exactly the way Joseph felt. My brothers are my enemies. They threw me in a pit. They wanted to kill me. They sold me into slavery. They wanted to get rid of me. In fact, they wanted to get rid of me and my dream. They're the enemy. What Joseph did not know was that was the way God was going to take him to victory. That's hard for us to understand. I don't expect my enemy to help me. And God has no problem using your enemy to take you to the victory that we have the problem with it. But I think God stands on the sideline as delighted in the fact that he could take the things that come against us and turn them into things that are for us. He takes the things that are liabilities of life and turn them into assets. God is capable of that kind of creative work. Adversity is the path. So the path that you're on is part of what God is involved in. And it may not seem, doesn't have to seem, listen, here's the illustration. The scripture says, Psalm 23, everybody knows that psalm. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. But if you want to get there, you got to go through, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. You will prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. If you want to get to surely goodness and mercy, you got to go through some stuff, and the stuff you go through is adversity, and there's no way around it. When David wrote, yea, though I walk through the valley, I want to rewrite it, yea, though I fly over the valley. Though I run through the valley. But it's a walk. And that's adversity. I can make it even clearer. It's important to make everything clear. In fact, that's my whole passion when it comes to preaching. Make it so clear that somebody walks out, they can understand it without even having to think about it. God took Moses by the hand and led him to the Red Sea. And 2.5 million Jews led them right to the Red Sea. When they got to the Red Sea, they looked at it and they said, this is an obstacle. This is our adversity. And so they turned around and they saw Pharaoh and his troops coming after them and said, wait a minute, this is our adversity. When they went to the right and to the left, they noticed the terrain was rough and they couldn't escape that way, so they were surrounded by their adversity, but all the while God took them by the hand and brought them to it, because it was the path that God leads to victory. And what they thought was designed to destroy them was the thing that God used to deliver them. And the thing that the enemy thought this was their end was their own end when the waters came tumbling back down. Because God knows how to lead his dear children along. Adversity is the path. And so if you're on that path, cheer up, because the Lord is with you and you will get through that. There is a better day coming. And God will show himself strong in your life. And then I want you to see this, that adversity is our teacher. It is what teaches us. Some things we will never learn unless we have faced adversity. We would never be able to get it into our head unless we face this thing of this resistance. When I was a kid, just a little kid, I was sitting on the table. I put a safety pin into an electrical socket. And this is what happened. Like I need to tell you what happened. It was a miracle. The only thing that happened was sparks and smoke. And I was totally afraid. I wasn't shocked. But I never did it again. Because adversity will teach you something. And some of the things that have happened to us that have hurt us and set us back, and we think that what a mess. And God says, I'm going to take that mess, I'm going to teach you something. I'm going to teach you what you should never do again. I grew up in poverty, which is no surprise. I've shared that with you before. I mean, we were poor, really poor. We lived in 2.5 rooms. 5 people in 2.5 rooms. 6 people when my father was alive. 2.5 rooms. The refrigerator was in the bedroom. The tub was in the kitchen. Mice never came into our apartment. There was nothing to eat. I lived with hand-me-down clothes. And in fact, I didn't know that hand-me-down clothes was a problem because everybody wore hand-me-down clothes. So I was feeling fine. But later on, when I started comparing my life with their life, whoa. And poverty taught me something. It taught me to be really careful with the money that I got. It taught me to save. Listen, if poverty hasn't taught you anything, you haven't been poor enough, because if poverty really is teaching you something, poverty will teach you to save and to be careful later on. Poverty will teach you to invest because you don't want to go back there again. That's how powerful the lessons are. And they come through adversity. It comes through the setbacks that come our way. It's just the way. Poverty is there to teach us. It's the teacher. It's going to teach us this. It's going to teach us that no weapon formed against you shall prosper. How will you ever know that no weapon formed against you will prosper unless some weapon was formed against you? How would you ever know that Jesus is the master of the wind and the waves unless you stepped into a storm? If you knew that Jesus was the master of the waves because you read it in a book somewhere, well, then you have some head knowledge. But if you ever step into a storm and you discover Jesus can calm the sea and quiet the wind, brother, you learn something. And it's through adversity. Seeds dream, just like people dream. Seeds. Every seed has a dream. The seed dreams that someday I'm going to grow and I will produce a flower and I'll produce fruit someday. It's their dream. So they're futuristic. Seeds are futuristic. They could look and have a vision into the future. They see what it can be, what it should be, what it will be. But before they can get to the where it can be, where it should be, and it will be, they got to be buried in the ground. They got to be trampled underfoot. They have to be soaked when it rains. They have to go into the dirt where it's dark. They have to suffer the cold. And when the sun comes out, it gets hot. And in the meantime, they're growing down with roots and up with a stalk. And the day comes when the dream is fulfilled. Because that seed has built in it the strength of your futuristic attitude. Someday I will be. Better just live. Someday I'm going to be a carrot. But that's the seed's dream. Someday we're going to be just what God said we were going to be. It doth not yet appear, but we will be what God said we will be. It's having an attitude, I'm looking. You know, we're not the only people that have dreams. And it must be that God had a dream too. And God dreamed that someday every knee shall bow to Jesus. And you know that lately the bowing the knee and taking the knee has been, Tebow took the knee and that was for Thanksgiving, thanking God for a touchdown. And then somebody else took it and decided they would give the knee for protest. We're gonna protest and kneel down instead of standing up before and God said, I just want you to know that one of these days every knee will bow. And every tongue will confess that Jesus is the Lord. But that's the dream. The dream is every knee will bow. But look around, pick up your newspaper, listen to the news media, and what do you see? You see wars and rumors of wars. I don't see anybody kneeling. Very few people are kneeling. I see pestilence and famine and terror and nuclear threats and nuclear weapons proliferating. I see injustice and crime and abuse. I say that's what I see. But God never changed the fact that the dream is every knee shall bow. God never dreams a dream that won't come to pass. And God would never give you a dream that he can't fulfill. There may be stuff that's in the way. There's always going to be stuff in the way. There may be adversaries and adversity that you got to fight. Because that's what it takes. It's the path to victory. I guess the question is, what would it take? What would it take? What will it take for the dream that God gave me to be fulfilled? Would it take a setback? Okay, if it's going to be a setback, it's a setback. Would it be a roadblock? Okay, roadblock, that's God going to use. Would it be disappointments? Well, okay, maybe disappointment. God's going to use, well, I know he's going to use adversity. What would God?
Sometimes it takes a mountain. Sometimes a troubled sea. Sometimes it takes a desert to get a hold of me.
So what will it take? What is it taking? A misunderstanding? Jealousy, anger, discouragement, doesn't matter, fill in the blank, it doesn't matter. But God will use it, whatever it, mountain, storm, desert, he uses it to get a hold of you, to get a hold of me. He won't let you go. Even if you try to let go, he won't let you go. His grip is much stronger than your grip. So the question is, how do we handle the mountain? And how do we handle the storm? And how do we handle the desert that comes our way? Simple. Prayer.
Sometimes it takes a mountain. Sometimes a troubled sea. Sometimes